Hello everyone, this is a presentation on Indian philosophy, the fourth module of Methodology of Humanities. So, in order to have a deep look into Indian philosophy, first of all, we have to define what is mean by philosophy. Philosophy, which came from the word philosophia, it is a Greek word which means love of wisdom. So just look into the other definition given to philosophy. It can be defined as means to ultimate truth, or love of reason, or love of human judgment and discrimination. From the above definition we have drawn, we can easily identify it is something like a set of rules or a set of methods adopted by human beings in order to attain the ultimate way of life or the ultimate way of success. So, it is not an easy process which is being adopted by human, and it comprises of observing and surveying the existence. That is, both the existence of human being and the nature at large. By combining the existence of both human being and nature, he draws certain kind of rules or certain kind of methods, certain kind of paths in order to attain the so-called success in his or her life. So when it comes to Indian context, since our topic is about Indian philosophy, we have to go deep into the Indian context. And when it comes to Indian context, uh, the philosophy, the word for philosophy is darshana, and it came from the word drishya, which means to see. So naturally we will have a doubt that what is meant by to see. It is only a physical perception. uh, we have been discussing by denoting the meaning of drishya as to see. But when it comes to darshana, it is not merely a physical sight which is being discussed here. It is, or it comprises of both conceptual and perceptual way of looking into the world. That means we have to have a perception, that means an attitude, and by using that perception we have to draw a concept about life in order to have a vision. That is a correct word we can choose for denoting the darshana which is being depicted in Indian context. So we can easily define this darshana as a vision of truth and reality. How we envisage truth and reality around us, how we perceive and how we conceptualize these kind of reality, and how that reality affects the mindset and action of our life. That constitutes the philosophy in Indian context. So naturally, when it comes to Indian context, it has got a large framework. It is not a limited version of viewing that is philosophy as a stream of knowledge or as a method to attain truth, but it has a large canvas from which we can have both perceptual and conceptual view of reality, and quite naturally it will gain us with great success. So an extra word we can draw within Indian context is the word moksha. As we all know, it is actually a unique word for Indian context. The concept of moksha came from Indian context. So we can define moksha as win over evil using philosophical pursuits. But when it comes to the attainment of moksha, we have to have a strong background of philosophical concepts. Then only we can achieve moksha. Moksha can be, that is, moksha's meaning can be given as, it can be a freedom, it can be a salvation, it can be something like freeing ourselves from our body, or it is actually a gaining of the ultimate knowledge, gaining of the ultimate power in its sense, or it can be a kind of satisfaction in the soul. Okay. Okay, next we have Vedas. Why Vedas? Because Vedas are the basic element or basic literary work which actually turns the Indian philosophical pursuits into a systematic one. So, in order to understand Indian context in philosophy, we have, first of all, we have to identify Vedas' importance in Indian culture. Okay, Vedas can be defined or it can be denoted as a collection of hymns and other religious texts. No need to explain the statement, because as we all know, it is a religious text or religious document, especially um, related to Hinduism, but it is not only comprises Hinduic ideology or exclusive Hinduic ideology, but it addresses life at large, and the universality and the exclusiveness, or the universality of the exclusiveness and universality of the Vedas are very famous. So, in order to understand Indian cultural philosophical pursuits, we have to understand what is meant by Vedas, and it usually it comprises of hymns. Hymns can be defined as praises of gods and goddesses, the quality of gods and goddesses, and other religious rules and rituals and customs embedded within the Vedas. And it is believed to be published between 1500 to 1000 BC, and it is considered as earliest literary records of Indo-Aryan civilization, and it can be it can not only be a it is not only be a religious text, it is also denoted as a literary work of art, so it has that quality also. Okay, when it comes to Indian context, why the context is very important. What is the background of India during that time, which actually makes it possible to have a high element of philosophical pursuit? Okay. um Basically, like other culture in ancient period, our civilization also followed oral tradition, that is transmitting knowledge orally from mouth to mouth. So there is no written document has been recording during that time, and during Vedic period, Vedas are considered as that is Vedas are considered as the most original source of philosophy because of its abundance of knowledge comprised within it, and it is impersonal also. The impersonal element is very vital because it is not related with any particular author, and no one that is identified the correct order of Vedas. So naturally, there is no one we can relate it with. So there is no biographical details we can relate, or there is no prejudice behind the writings happening in the mind of the reader or those who follow it. So naturally, it is mostly impersonal. So it is basically impersonal in nature. and it makes it a very independent document. And the tradition or the teaching tradition during that time is mouth to mouth tradition, as we all know. That is from the mouth of the teacher, that is guru, to the disciple, that is shishya, guru to shishya, mouth to mouth tradition of transferring of knowledge. And during that is transferring of knowledge, both teacher and the disciple faced some fundamental philosophical questions, and they try to ask the question and they try to answer these questions by looking into the things happening around them, and by drawing real life experience, they try to answer these questions. And it is basically philosophical in nature. And I will tell some one or two questions here. The questions like, what is the world? If it is a creation, and who is the creator? Then what is the nature of reality, etc. So then questions like this has been asked by the teacher to the disciple in order to find out and to inculcate curiosity in the mind of the disciple. And so naturally the student will start to ask these questions to himself, and he will look into the nature in order to find solution for these questions. And he will find out the correct answer, which turn out to be the philosophical goals in his life. Okay. And the Vedas, or how these Vedas constituted into a kind of basic in Indian culture. Okay. And these kind of hymns practiced by the teacher to disciple, which asked several fundamental questions of life. It is systematized into a collection of hymns. Why hymns? Why need a need of hymns? We can easily ask question directly. Why they use the method of hymns? Because if it is in the form of praising or the praising of gods or something like a mantra, then it will naturally influence the mind of the common man, because common man usually influenced by the presence of religious background in everything. So using that psychological method, they systematized their queries into the method of, or into the form of hymns. And later it is turned out to be like Vedas and Upanishads, and these hymns later known as Vedas and that is Upanishads. Okay. The main now we have to make a clear difference or distinction between the Western kind of philosophy and the Eastern kind of philosophy. Why or in what matter is Western philosophy or Indian philosophy is different from Western philosophy? Okay, the main difference between Western philosophy and Indian philosophy is, the first one is specific, but Indian philosophy gives us a comprehensive view. What is the difference between specific view and comprehensive view? So, in order to understand the statement, we have to look into the Western treatment. That means they just, that is specifically looked into some specific subject, and they narrow down everything in a micro level. Then they started to investigate that query in that stream. For example, if it is in the if it is a problem which is related to psychology, that is the human mind, then in Western context, they started to narrow it down into the psychological perception, and they only look for psychological questions and psychological answers. And they didn't take any kind of other aspects which can be combined with psychology, or we can which can be used as a parallel to psychology, but they just narrow it down to one subject. That is why it is known as very much specific. But when it comes to Indian context, it has got a large scale. It has a comprehensive view. That means it try to view a problem in all sides. That means that means from the four sides, or from the all sides, that they try to view the psychological, if it is in the context of psychology, they try to view from the psychological part, from the financial part, from the health part, and other aspects, even from the that is naturalistic view of life. So it has got a comprehensive, something like a 360-degree view of life, and they try to solve the problem in that context. Okay. Okay, next is the concept Purushartha. So, in order to understand what is meant by Purushartha, we can easily give meaning to Purushartha as goals, but it is not an appropriate word to denote the meaning of Purushartha. Okay, we can try to dismantle the word Purushartha. Okay, that is, it is defined as what is sought by men, and it can be defined as it may be a goal or a way to attain another goal which is more relevant. Okay, let's see. When it comes to a human being's life, we start our life, and as we go on in our life, we faced with many kind of opportunities, obstacles, problems, success, failure, relationship, etc., etc., etc. These are all our, these are all part of our life. And when it comes to the there is a solving of each and every matter in our life, some matter seems to us as the final goal of our life, but some may not. That second kind of, that is matters, which may be a kind of temporary goals in our life, but it will, but it is not the final goal, but it will lead ourselves into attain the so-called final goal in our life. So when it comes to Purushartha, it can be defined as goals in our life, but it can easily be defined as the things which actually give us meaning in our life. It may be a temporary goal, or a permanent goal, or a way to goal, or some other kind of that is path which actually give us the final resolution in our life. Okay, let's look into the four goals, which actually divides our motives in our that is motives in our life. Okay, it is named as Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. All these four words will be familiar to you, I'm sure. Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. But We have to go deep into each and every word in order to understand what is meant by Purushartha. Okay? The first two things, Artha and Kama, it is basically materialistic, isn't it? It is basically materialistic, which is related to the physical world, that is, the riches, the wealth, the opportunities, the success we achieve in our life, etc., come under Artha. And for achieving Artha, every human being has got a strong urge in his mind, and that strong urge will drive him to the attainment of this Artha. That is why we are running after riches and wealth. Okay? Then, next one is Kama, and it is a pursuit of pleasure. It is not only physical pleasure but all kinds of pleasure, and it is basic natural instinct of human being. Example, food, drink, etc., which actually satisfies our body. Okay, so the first two things, that is Artha and Kama, it is not the final goal in our life. It is only a comfortable, soothing way or soothing kind of goal which actually give us some base in order to move further, which actually feeds us with energy in order to work for the ultimate success in our life. Okay, then next one is dharma. What is meant by dharma? It is easily defined as righteousness. Okay, and how this dharma works out? It actually works out by the obligation towards his own self, fellow men, and other life in universe. And how it works? We have got a conscience, isn't it? When we do something wrong in our life, our conscience will start to torture us or tease us, isn't it? Why? Because we have got a dharma in our mind or in our culture. So we'll start to question ourselves that is it right or wrong? Okay. So naturally that urge or that kind of feeling which actually makes us obligate towards ourselves, that is in order to make us good or better, and the feeling obligation towards our fellow being, that is why we are acting good towards or acting just towards our fellow beings and other things in universe, that is towards nature, the prakriti. Okay, then so naturally that kind of obligation is a base of this kind of righteousness in our life or the dharma. Okay, the last pursuit or the last kind of goal, sorry, not pursuit, goal in our life is moksha. Like like I have already defined in the first slide, moksha, it is actually an exclusive, unique word for our culture. It can be defined as liberation or the ultimate goal in which man overcomes dualities of life. That is liberation. It is not the liberation or the liberty we are talking in our today's world. It is actually a liberation from pain, suffering, other all kinds of entanglement in the physical world, freeing ourselves from the body, the soul, the relationships, the things we attain through karma and artha, and all kinds of bondage, freeing ourselves from pain, freeing ourselves from anger, agony, etc. So, freeing itself from all attachments, expectations, and desires. Okay, so it is actually the last stage of or last goal of our life, or um, the in the life of a human being. Okay. So when it comes to the Indian philosophy, why Vedas are in the form of, or we have already said that it is in the form of collection or systematized collection of hymns, and hymns be or can be considered as some kind of praising of god and goddesses. Why it has got a religious tinge in it? Why the philosophers didn't try to communicate their knowledge directly into the mind of common people or to the mind of their disciples? Because religion is the best medium in every culture through which individual try to attain an ideal, because we have got a supernatural element in it. We being human, that is natural beings, we have our own limitations, and we acknowledge our limitations, that is both physical and mental. So when it comes to religion, we have got these gods and goddesses who can be considered as epitome of power, epitome of righteousness, or epitome of success, etc. So, in order to model everything, we constitutes this kind of uh, this kind of religious attire. So naturally, it will be easier for the teacher to communicate these idea indirectly through the religious quotings, and the knowledge they attain through religious background is known as Tattvajnana. Tattvajnana. So there, that Tattvajnana, that word is it is not a normal jnana or normal knowledge. It is something like an elite version of knowledge. That means it has got some supernatural element in it. So that Tattvajnana, which must be perfect also, Tattvajnana actually paves the way to moksha. So that Tattvajnana, which came from the religious background, gives way to this kind of philosophical pursuit in Indian context.